Good morning. This morning we're going to have a conversation in AI with Jim Chilton from Cengage. He's becoming a close friend and somebody that I've enjoyed talking to. And today we're going to have a little more conversations about what's going on in AI. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Rusty. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. So we've talked twice now. And at the first conversation that we had, we just kind of got an idea. I've been wanting to talk to you about your role at Cengage. So one of the things that I did pick up on, you've had a background in both the private sector and kind of the educational space. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I have spent 25 years in software and technology companies up until I joined Cengage 7 years ago. And so, my background is really from software and tech. And there are some pretty distinct differences between, call it the software and tech companies and education companies. I think there's some shared parts, but I think the both types of companies have, innovation, efficiency, things like that. But there is a real difference that I found here in the education space that I've not experienced before. It is, it's unique. It's unique to the education space. And I think it is, has a lot to do with the values that a company has and what they're trying to do, and the notion of academic integrity and the other AI, as I've been told it's called. And so, and really making sure that as a business in the education business, you need to care and understand about the customers that you're serving and what's important to them. And that's very different when you look at the companies I was at before in software and tech and where we are now. I found them to be similar in some spaces and really, really different in others.
Do you prefer one over the other?
Great question. I feel like we used to say the emotional paycheck. And the emotional paycheck was that notion that you found value in what you were doing. And I would say that one of the reasons I really enjoyed my time at Cengage is that a father of four, all out of college now, I feel like we are trying to make a difference in a system that can use some help. And so it does feel good. I get the emotional paycheck of engaging with Cengage, talking with our customers, the work that we're doing. Very different than when you're just building software for people and they may or may not use it the way you intended, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little different.
Absolutely. So it's been a little over a year since really AI just came to the forefront, at least in my world. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things that shows up one day and you go, what's that? You download the app and you type in something and you're just amazed. How did it work for you? When did it first get on your radar, and when did you realize this is a big deal?
Oh, geez. So I think there's really two areas. One is that in my prior company, and you and I talked a bit about this, is that I helped start a company called SolidWorks, which is a 3D design company. And we started working in artificial intelligence way back then. And so the notion was that we did generative design inside our products. So when you think about, literally asking the software to design me a cost-effective chair using these types of plastics with this type of price point, and it would start to generate a chair design. And so that was kind of my early introduction. This goes back to 2014, 2015. So it's been around for a while in different forms. When it comes to generative AI and what we've been talking about, it was in that announcement of ChatGPT in October, November of 22, where I brought it up to the executive team weeks after the announcement and said, this is going to rock our world. We had an executive all-day meeting and I put it big in whiteboard and they were all like, what is a ChatGPT and what are we doing about it? And so during the lunch break, I took every member of the executive team and actually had them use the product and get an understanding. And I'm like, ask it anything that you think our customers would want to do. And I think it was this eye-opening moment at Cengage of, this is going to change our world. We don't know how, we don't know what, we don't know when, but it will change the world in what we provide education tools and learning systems for our customers.
Wow. So since that time, what's kind of been the vision of integration of AI in higher education, not necessarily in Cengage, but just in higher education?
I mean, I think that, we've done a ton of research around this with institutions, professors, and students. And I think we're trying to really let the research drive where we think we're going. But overall, I see AI in higher ed as, the tailored and learning experience, how you can dial in and really adjust the knobs to really help certain people, certain segments at certain times during their education of a certain discipline. So it allows for a level of, specificity down to the instructor, the discipline, and the student that just didn't exist before. Before, you were looking at this thing where everybody had to kind of march to the same beat at the same time for the course, the discipline, the learning to occur. This really allows that to take a little more twists and turns along that journey. And we think there's a real opportunity there. But we want to be thoughtful about how we do it. We've seen some of our competitors do what we think are, when you look at OpenAI today, it's using sources of data from everywhere that it combed the internet for. We know as a society that is riddled with misinformation and problems. So for me, that being a basis for education and learning is fundamentally flawed if we believe that the material it started with is fundamentally flawed. Sure. So we do think that matters as well. So it's not just the technology, the content and how you tie it into that technology ultimately, I think, will make a real difference in higher education.
So one of the things that, and I know I sent you questions, but as I told you before, I just kind of make as I go along. But one of the things that I was curious about, I've noticed here in our educational institution that there's kind of two camps of faculty members. And I assume your customers are faculty members and they're also students. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if one rate's higher than the other or who picks, what they get, but regardless, and our faculty members kind of land on two sides, right? You have the side that's going, this is wrong, we're not going to use it. It's unethical, it's cheating, whatever the case is, and how do we just block it down? To the other people are going, we got to figure this out. Mm-hmm. Right? And we got to know how to let our students utilize it because they're going to use it. Mm-hmm. So kind of how does Cengage going to deal with this divide?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think our research assumed exactly that, Rusty, which is when we talked to a few thousand instructors throughout the country, and I'll give you some examples of where they agree and strongly agree and where they disagree and strongly disagree. And I think it does the bifurcation exactly what you're talking about, which is this notion that AI is inevitable and instructors must adapt to what students want is something that in general they agree with. They don't know how yet, but they agree that that's a principle. They also agree that instructors must be knowledgeable for them to be beneficial. Not knowing anything about them will allow them not to be really beneficial for the instruction process. And there's still a fair amount of uncertainty about the future and how it works. Where they start to disagree or they don't understand is, this is too soon to assess the impact. How will this matter? How will it fit? Instructors still don't know enough about it. Academic integrity is at the top of their list of concerns of things like, and the technology is really not ready for use in education. And the question if it's needed in education space. I think the one quote that we got that through the research that I loved, which was, and I can't give credit to the professor because I don't know who it was, but they said there will never be an artificial element that can replace human empathy, compassion, dedication, and connection. Wow. And I think for me, that was really powerful in the sense of saying, how do we make sure, and I can talk a bit about this in a minute, of when we think about the technology we've built, is how do we ensure that it supports and develops critical and analytical thinking and doesn't replace it? That's going to be, we think, a key component to how artificial intelligence can help in this space.
So, I mean, that brings up a good point. How will you do that?
Well, I think for us is that the way we've thought about it, Rusty, is a small group of us, literally 3 or 4 of us last year, we watched some companies just take all kinds of information, petabytes of information, throw it into an LLM, and make it commercially available to students. And say, there you go. You can ask it anything, and it will help you answer your homework, write your papers, etc. And so we pumped the brakes because the commercial side of the business was like, sure, we can do that. We can do that. I mean, we have 4.5 petabytes of data between Cengage Group. If you think about it, we have a higher ed business. We have a K-12 with National Geographic. We have Gale, which is our library service. We have a lot of data, a lot of fact base. It would have been very easy for us to do that. The team and I concluded we weren't going to. And what we decided was that we were going to focus our chatbots and our LLM specifically that it was Cengage owned. We're not going to use somebody's external one that is riddled with all kinds of other information and tiptoes all around copyright laws and problems like that. We were going to focus on a specific book, a specific discipline. So in our case, the chatbot would be associated with a specific ISBN and or materials from the professor. And so that way it does two things for us, is that it allows the chatbot to be focused on the specific materials that an instructor is teaching. What we heard from the instructors was this random examples from other sources is actually not helpful to the education process. I'm herding cats as it is. Them coming to the table with, I found these 16 examples in ChatGPT that have nothing to do with the material that was provided to the student is actually not valuable. It actually takes away from the learning process. And so what we're trying to do is dial in our chatbot specifically to that material. The other thing we found is that this exponentially increased our accuracy rate through our AI bots. If you look at the standard bots today, they're about 62% accurate. So consider that and say, how could you improve that? Well, you improve that by providing it less information, not more. And so for us, the less information is what we have in technology called grounded. And now there's REG, which is also a process of a grounded technology where you make the LLM specifically focus on a specific source of data. And that's what we've done here. The second part that we did was we don't provide answers. We provide the next best step. So if you're looking at something, in our case, our first one that we introduced was around math. And when you think about algebra or Pythagorean's theorem, it's going to ask you, specific sets of questions to help entice you about what would the first step be. If the student has figured out the first step, then we're going to ask him what the next step should be. And if the student gets frustrated and says, I don't understand, just give me the answer, I'm in a rush, it will actually say, I can't give you the answer. I can help you with the next best step. So we've built the programs on a series of algorithms that only allows the next best step. We can't give you the answer. It's programmed not to give you the answer. So it's supportive in the next step. We feel like this is going to be very unique to what we offer and feel like it's going to be super valuable in the learning process.
I think that also, squash a lot of the fears that faculty have, and also provide students with probably the best learning outcomes as far as learning the material instead of just learning how to find the material.
Exactly.
That will be neat. When do you think this will be available? If you don't want to,
we've done some early beta stuff in our WebAssign product, and I'm not the product team, so I can't give you official answers, but I know that we will be introducing more of them in the coming months and coming seasons that will be dialed in. But if you think about it that way, the way we've built the technology is to be able to replicate this across our different disciplines and our different books. The way I think of it, Rusty, is I would like to get to a place where if you think of a specific course, microeconomics, taught on Tuesday and Thursday by Professor Gardner, I would like our chatbot to be dialed into you at your school with your book and your addendums. That to me is where we've reached the ultimate target. So that way the chatbot we're providing is so dialed in that it only knows the material and understanding that you have selected for your class and your students. It will increase our accuracy and it will support the learning that is happening there. The second part that I really have to mention, I almost forgot, was what we've seen where English is a second language is the ability for our chatbots to flip-flop between native language, especially on math, is a really important variable. We've seen significant result improvement where people are both confused about the subject matter, but also the way it's being explained, because it's being explained to them in their second language, not their primary language. So our chatbots will interchange languages so if you started the conversation in English, you can go over to Spanish, you can go over to Vietnamese in the same problem. So whatever is your primary way of learning, the chatbot will help, which also takes a ton of pressure off the instructors to be like, how do I navigate English as a second language when I'm trying to help people get through these principles on something like math or chemistry or biology?
That's going to be fascinating to see how this actually changes the success level for our students. And do you have a way, or you said it's in the beta right now. Mm-hmm. What are you going to consider success?
Great question. I think for me, two things. I think for me is that it will be the efficacy and the outcomes of those students and those instructors who embrace the technology that we'll provide have a better improved outcomes across the board compared to prior years. So if we were to say this entire season, this entire semester, we've done this now with the supporting chatbot on my discipline, my class, do you have a better outcome in regards to grade performance of your students as a result of that? So the efficacy of that to me is success, almost regardless of the form that it takes. And so, is there a grade level in performance that would allow, and in my mind, what I really think, like we all know, A students will be A students. That's not going to change, right? So I think that this notion of, can we take C, or better yet, D students, people who are thinking about not finishing at all this course, can we move them up to a place where they feel more confident in the material and more confident in the learning process? For me, that would be success.
That'd be great. That's what I would have needed in school.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah, exactly.
Being able to do there. So let me ask you this, and you've touched on it just a little bit, but as far as the ethical side of it, which comes up all the time, do y'all have a policy in place? Who holds you accountable?
We actually do, and we have a number of this. So early on in the history of this at Cengage, I announced the policy to all 5,000 employees right out of the gate about what our employees can and cannot do with generative AI, what tools they can and cannot use. And so having a very clear policy for our employees, I think, was really helpful. And what I didn't want to do was block our own internal learning. So basically we created Cengage GPT inside the company for all of them to use and test and experiment with. What I asked them to do is not use the public ones, because our copyrighted material, we have arrangements with authors and all kinds of folks that we don't want to be sharing that out in the public domain. So that was the first thing. The second part of it was making sure that we were adhering to our stringent data protection laws and ethical guidelines, whether you're talking about state rail compliance or GDPR compliance, is to make sure that we are learning from the things that people are doing, but we're not capturing the information that would allow you to infringe on any personal rights or privacy rights that exist. It would be very easy during this process to be capturing all kinds of information and follow these students or instructors on every click that they do. That's not our intention with this at all. And again, technically, sure, we could do that, just like we could have taken all kinds of petabytes of data, thrown it in there, and charged $10 to students for it. We didn't do that either.
Right. So I think one of the things that I see here, so as our college, and I'm sure Microsoft did this strategically, right? So they give you a Copilot and they give you data integrity. So you're going, okay, I have that. Yep. And it's kind of, I feel like a lot of the ones the educational institutions are picking up who have Microsoft licensing agreements, because it's there and we don't know, it's still new enough to us that we're not sure exactly what to do with it, right? So it's been one of the struggles. But we still deal with the issue that everybody has their own, right? On their phone or their computer, they have their preferences of which one they like and which one they don't like. And so the control aspect, especially in a public educational space, has been a little more difficult for us than it would be for you guys. And we don't have our own. We can't make our own yet. Yeah. So, and I'm just curious, how difficult is it to make your own?
Well, I think for me, but it's really less about making your own. It's more about like licensing the technology and then grounding its sources. And so what I mean by that is that, so in our case, whether you pick a Cohere or OpenAI or others, and there's a bunch out there, open source or otherwise, that you can pick, the key part, Rusty, is that controlling the source of information that's flowing through it. So in our case, what I'm saying is that I want that LLM to understand languages, all kinds of languages, like we talked about before. I want them to be able to flip-flop between Spanish and English and Vietnamese at the click of a button. What I don't want it to have is any other source of information. None. I don't want to know who won the Super Bowl. I don't want to know around Taylor Swift and NFL. I don't want to know about politics. I want it to know nothing other than what I've specifically taught it. And that's the part that we're really dialed into. So for you to be able to create one for your school is that being able to do that and refine it where you're controlling the source of information. And I think we continue to experiment about this, about what is being core to the actual technology and what is being the information that that technology is applying to its responses. And that's an area where we're spending a fair amount of time studying.
So where do you think we're going to, what would this conversation go 5 years from now? Where do you see it going?
Oh, yeah, this is super interesting. I think we'll see a couple of things. I think we will see one person's opinion is that I think we're going to see both breadth and depth of this just explode. And what we've seen already, when you look at Sora, which if you've read anything about this, is that this tool will allow you to give it a narrative-based guidance to create a full operating video. And really, really impressive technology. So you think about the industries that exist today and the disruption that could happen, both from a text to video or text to movie or text to really start to think through what could that narrative be. Like literally, could you get to a place where you're feeding it a script or a play and it is creating a full running movie or TV scene? That is kind of profound. So I think we're going to see the depth of things it will be able to generate, both from a virtual reality perspective, spatial computing perspective. I think we're going to see a lot more in that space. Going actually to this area, I think what we'll do is going to go much deeper so that you could say to a chatbot, generate a thesis with resources cited and give me a paper on immunology in 2024 here in a specific country, specific state, and it will generate the entire report with sources cited. That's where I think we could get to. Now that becomes really, really profound. I think to me, that's the reason that I'm so uptight about the sources that these current tools are using and where they're getting it from. Because for me, if we don't have a strong fact base, all of this falls apart so incredibly quickly, because you'll end up with, buried within things that you're trusting as a fact, and a source will not be a fact or a source that you can trust. And one of two things comes out of that. People could be like dismissive of this doesn't matter because it's not the truth, or worse, they take it as the truth. And this is the same problem we have across social media platforms today and so on. And I think that for me, I'm a big advocate for technology and technologists being held more accountable for what their platforms can do around this information rather than not. So for me, I would be an advocate for, if something does generate gross and misinformation on a regular basis, you should be able to be held accountable for your technology doing that. I know I'm not a popular technologist making that statement, but that's exactly how I feel. And because we have social media platforms today that, in my opinion, do exactly this and have not been held accountable.
Well, and in words that I didn't even know existed till 6 months ago, like deep fake, which is coming up all the time, and those sort of things. Our language is even changing of how we refer to things. So let me ask you if you think this is a possibility, because I keep thinking about it in my head. So let's say for tutoring a student,
mm-hmm.
you think there'll be a time to where we're going to actually have a character, a person per se, that's created by generative AI that can interact with me? So as I'm trying to learn something, I can ask this tutor, and it's available to me 24/7. I can tell it I don't understand. Can you simplify it? Can you make it easier? And then the experience is not going to be just necessarily text, but it'll be, visual as well, what we're working at. You see that as being an option at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Avatar-based learning and engagement around this. We've seen some of this already with companies that we've talked to. They have working demonstrations of this now, Rusty. So I've seen it. So yeah, I think I'm completely convinced that we will have that as an option. I think going back to that earlier quote, which I fell in love with, is that I don't think, and I do think this is more than 5 years out, I could be wrong, is that empathy, compassion, and connection is, I don't think, something that we'll be able to help. So in other words, I think the difference between a real tutor and a virtual tutor would be the explanation of the student and what else is going on in their lives and what their problems are, and understanding that. I think a real human being and understanding that emotional connection with a student and what their experience, I think, allows both teachers, professors, educators in general to understand the people that they're trying to help. This will be binary in my mind. This will not be able to understand emotion and sentiment, at least early on. I think there'll be an attempt to it, but we'll wait and see. But the avatar part itself, yeah, easy enough, to be honest.
You bring up a really good point. And as you go back to that quote, I remember my days in college, and I was not an incredible student by far, right? But I went to a small school, and in the school, I did better than I'd done in any other school. But it wasn't because the teachers were better. It was because I had a relationship with the instructors. Mm-hmm. I knew them, they knew me, and it was that relationship that caused me to do better. It wasn't the content. And I think a lot of times is people fear AI. It's just something, you can't replace that human aspect that makes us want to be better people.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think you're spot on. And I had similar experiences myself, Rusty. And I think that understanding the value of that, I think will be there. The question I would raise is that I do think that, particularly in topics where I've watched friends, classmates, and family struggle, I think this technology could have made a real difference. I watched one of my classmates that we had been in the same classes all through high school and into college, and where we started to separate was on some of the more difficult things beyond calculus. And it's an area where I was really quite comfortable, but he was not. And it wasn't because I was any brighter, but it was because I think had he been able to have some of this technology we're talking about today, I think he would have been able to stay on that path longer.
Absolutely. Yeah. I noticed that you guys, or I heard from someone, that you guys have a VP of AI.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I really like to apply for that. That sounds like a fun job. What does a VP of AI actually do?
Yeah, so the woman's name is Thais, and I had a lot to do with her selection, and I am super proud of it. I think what we've discovered and I've advocated for in the last year at Cengage is that AI deserves its own team and dedicated team at Cengage. It shouldn't be just a part of people's jobs. There should be a team focused on this, about where we're going and what we're doing specifically with our products. And Thais has been with us for many years. She's done lots of product creation in the education space. And so she'll continue to focus on how do we take these AI things, much of what we talked about today. And what I said before, there was a small group of 4 or 5 of us working together this past year. Thais was one of them. So she shares the same values that I've described here today and wants to bring those to our customer-facing products. So I'm really excited about it. And I love the idea of us having a dedicated team and dedicated leadership on this. I think it's that important that it's not just another widget or attribute to our products.
Sure. Do you think this is going to be a bigger movement than the internet was?
I think it's going to be a different movement. I think that, for me, the internet, I equate it more to like cell phone technology. I think it was a few years back where they finally had concluded that anybody on the planet that wanted to have a cell phone could. And you think about that, it's probably 35 years after the cell phone was actually created, before everybody on the planet had one. And as a result of that, had now access to the internet. So I think it's going to be in the certain societies. I think this is going to go like gangbusters. It will be exactly like that. I think for some parts of society, often it will be decades before it makes its way across the world. And I think that's the part that it's a little concerning. I think it's for the people that need it the most. I hope we can build things that are affordable, that allow it, because I think this is one of the things where I think the people that could use the benefit of this, at least as we're talking about it, from education and learning, are the very people that probably have limited access and limited means to do these things.
Sure. So I have one last question for you. You answered it, but the last one I hear, kind of what's on your roadmap?
Yeah. So, the product people would kill me if I told you that, but what I can say is that things we've talked about today are definitely on our roadmap. This is the path that we're on, and we've been participating in small betas. We have many customers, and so I would say that I would encourage any of you and your team to reach out and ask if they can participate in the betas when we offer them. I think it's a ton of fun. But if you take the principles that we talked about today, Rusty, I'd have a hard time believing why that principle wouldn't apply to all of our disciplines and all of our books. And so then you start to think about that and be like, imagine a world where every ISBN had an accompanied chatbot to help that student, help that instructor. That is a world that I imagine. Now, the sequence of which ones go first and all of that, I can't. I'm sure there's a commercial value to, we sell more economics than we do calculus, so they should go first, second, third. I would be able to comment on those things, but what I would say is that from a technology perspective, I am thrilled with what we've created. I think will allow us to do this across a multitude of disciplines with the same approach that we've discussed here today.
It's amazing. Jim, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day. This has been such a refreshing conversation. And, in 5 years from now, I'll probably send it to you and say, so were you right or wrong?
I'd love that. That'd be perfect.
See that. Hopefully I'll run into you somewhere.
I would like that as well.
That'd be great. And really, thank you so much for your time today and for Cengage allowing you to spend a little time with us.
It's my pleasure. Absolutely enjoyed this.
Thank you.
All right. You take care, Rusty. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.